Welcome to episode 53 of the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. Today we're going to check in. How are you doing? Is this COVID pandemic getting the best of you? I realized lately that I've been struggling a little emotionally and I have not been doing all the things I want to do. So in this podcast, I'm going to get real and tell you what's been going on. And we're going to look at the 9 areas that are having a negative effect on people's lives during this pandemic. I'm going to tell you my 4 wins and how they've helped me, and we're going to get actionable now. So let's get started. Welcome to the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. I'm Kim McLaughlin and I'm your host. I am an author, blogger, psychotherapist, and podcaster. I help people when they're feeling frustrated, overloaded, and overwhelmed, and it shows up in overeating and just generally not feeling good about yourself. Today we're talking about checking in, and this is my chance to check in with all of you about where I'm at, but I want you to also use this as an opportunity for you to check in with yourself and really have a look at how are you doing, because I'm finding people aren't feeling so good. We've been having this pandemic since February, March, and many of the parts of the country we've been in lockdown in various ways, and I'm no different than anybody else with that. What I noticed, or how I kind of came to realize I needed to have this check-in with myself and with all of you, is because I realized recently that I hadn't done my podcast for 2 months, which was really kind of odd because I had been doing this podcast for 52 weeks pretty consistently before these last 2 months. And I had been placing the podcast on my list to do, and I just wasn't doing it. I was finding other things to take over my time. What I did was I started to ask myself, why am I not doing this? Is this something, is the podcast something I don't want to do anymore? And what I found was I actually really did want to do it, but something was happening inside of me that was blocking me from moving forward and from getting kind of back in the saddle, so to speak, and doing it. It reminded me of my clients and how everybody I talk to, they have this kind of general sense of malaise, or this sense of not being able to get everything done, or things just not feeling right. And what I ask them consistently is, so how is this pandemic affecting you? How are you feeling about it? And they'll generally say to me, oh, I'm doing okay. It's all right. I'm getting through it. And when we talk deeper about this pandemic and how it's been affecting their lives, I actually find, and they find, that it's had a great effect on their lives, and there's more going on and more struggle than they've really realized. A year ago, our lives looked really different than it does today, and I want to honor for all of you that it does look different, and let's check in about that and be honest that there might be something different going on, or it feels different, and that maybe you don't like it, because I don't like it. I find it difficult to maneuver through, but it's something that is real and is actually affecting my life as it is affecting your life. So how did I get to this point with my check-in? I want to talk to you through what I did so you can do this for yourself too. And what I realized was that I just felt off. I didn't feel quite settled in myself, and I wasn't doing the things that I would normally do, such as doing this podcast. So I started to evaluate, why was I feeling off? What was different in my life? And I came up with 9 areas. There's probably even more if I really talked more about what's going on, but there are 9 areas. I got to tell you, nobody in my family is sick. Nobody has got the coronavirus. Nobody has been sick by this disease or by this illness. So I don't want to put that out, because there's probably some of you that have had people that have been very sick, and that's an even bigger effect on your life than what I'm going to talk about for my life. So here's some things that I've noticed that have happened for me that have led me to feel off during this pandemic. One, my daughter is home in virtual school, and that's been really tough for her, as I think it is for most families, to not be in school, not being seeing her friends, and not having that face-to-face interaction with her teachers. At this point, they're back to school part-time in a what they call a hybrid model, but she still doesn't get a lot of time with her friends or with her teachers, and they have to wear a mask and they have to clean up. And so it looks very different than it did last year. So that's one area that's different. The other for me is that I decided to let go of my physical office space and do psychotherapy virtually from my home office. And that's a huge change for me because I'm very much an extrovert and like to be out with people and out in community. And this has been a huge change for me. It's actually ended up being a good change in terms of my business and my family life. So I am grateful that I have this opportunity. Since I'm doing my private practice psychotherapy office virtually at home, I can be home when my daughter is home doing her virtual school. And so that had worked out and continues to work out really well. I also have had less opportunity to see people during the pandemic. I, once again, am very social. I'm an extrovert. I love being out and about with people, and that just hasn't been able to happen. And I've been feeling the effects of that and the effects of not being in close proximity with other people. I've had less time with my extended family, less time with friends, and that, once again, has been hard for me. And I want to own that probably is the same for many of you, that you might not be seeing anybody at all, or you might be seeing people on a limited basis, but it still has been very different for us. Our vacation was canceled and we have had less trips than normal. And that is something I always look forward to. We looked forward to this great trip over the summer and it just wasn't able to happen. So I feel sad about that. In the beginning of the virus, back in March, my husband was sent to work from home virtually, and we had obviously less space with me working from home and him working from home, and our daughter having school at home. And we made the best of it. But after about a month into the pandemic, he was laid off. They didn't have enough work, and that has been an interesting difficulty for us. And I know that's been a difficulty for many people in terms of being laid off, having limited amount of works, not knowing even if you could go back to work or if there would be a job available for you. And it creates job stress, but it also creates financial stress on families, as it did on mine. And that has been tough. Another area that has been difficult for me that I never would have thought of is just feeling physically off, partly because my gym was closed in the beginning of the pandemic. And so we were doing virtual workouts, which I found kind of difficult. I'm not as motivated to do virtual activity as I am to do it in the gym itself. And I noticed that my body is feeling a little more stress because of the amount of sitting that I've been doing. I sit to do the therapy, but also there's not a lot of places to go out to. So I noticed that I'm not having that kind of, walk to the car, drive somewhere, get out of the car, walk around the store, go meet with people and walk around. That hasn't been happening. So there's been a lot more sitting. And I have noticed that in my back and in the various parts of my body, that it's just not felt so good. The other thing for me that's happened in my life is I've really been feeling emotionally the instability in our country and in the world around the pandemic, around elections, around just differences of opinions. And I've noticed that that's made me feel really off and really unsettled and unbalanced. And I want you to wonder for yourself, is that maybe something that's going on for you too, that all the instability that's going on has been affecting you also? Lastly, what I've realized with my clients and also for myself is that I've been using food for comfort more than I used to. I talk about food as using intuitive eating and getting back in touch with your body. And I got to say, especially in the beginning of the time with the pandemic when we were at home and kind of scared about what was going on without a lot of understanding about the coronavirus, is that I ate more than I would usually eat, and I would eat foods that I wouldn't normally eat. And I've noticed that a lot of my clients have been talking about that. I notice a lot of people on different social media platforms will talk about all the weight that they've gained because they've been eating so differently and because it's been more stressful, as well as people are feeling challenged being at home so much and not getting into the refrigerator or not getting into the cabinet and eating things. So it's been more of a struggle for many people. And just to be honest, it was difficult for me in the beginning about using food for comfort. So notice this list. This is my personal list. And do any of these areas fit for you? Truthfully, as I look over this list and when I began to realize that I was feeling this way and I had these really 9 areas of difficulty impacting me, I realized that this was the time I needed to reimagine how I was going to live my life and what I was going to do for my personal care and my personal wellness. Because I know that the more I get back in touch with myself, the more I'm in action and doing something different, I feel better in my body, I feel better emotionally, and I feel better mentally. When I feel better, I do better. And that actually is one reason why I'm able to do this podcast right now, because I have been instituting or reimagining how I live day to day, the things that I do day to day, in order to kind of recycle or finish that loop of noticing what's going wrong, having that check-in with myself, and then now what am I going to do differently about it? And that's where I want to engage in the second part of this podcast, which is talking about literally some of the things that I have done that have had a huge positive effect on me, so that you can consider, these are examples and ideas about what you could do after your check-in to recreate, reimagine your lifestyle right now to increase your wellness. Hi, everyone. This is Kim, and my book is out. Feed Your Soul, Nourish Your Life, a 6-step system to peace with food is live. I recommend you get it. It has all my 6 components of feeding your soul, as well as my own story. Pick it up now. You can find it on my website at feedyoursoulunlimited.com. Thanks. The first and most important thing, which really surprises me when I looked at it, was I made a commitment to increase my movement. I told you that my gym shut down. We had been doing virtual workouts, and that wasn't great for me. I had been doing walks with my family, but then in California, we started having a lot of fires, so I couldn't walk outside like I did because the smoke was horrible outside. It was really becoming a problem for me, the sitting and the not being active and not having any kind of movement. And my body felt really bad. So I started back to my gym when we had outdoor exercise, outdoor workouts. And what I found was that the more consistent I was in my movement, the better I physically felt. The better I physically felt, the better emotionally I felt. And I realized that if I was going to commit to one thing for myself, I was going to commit to the one thing being movement. And so I have, over these couple of months, I have made it a priority on my schedule, on my list, that I would go and do my movement, do my workout. I've been doing it 5 days a week consistently. And I've noticed that when I made it the one thing, I made it really important for myself, really a non-negotiable, I go and do it. I know the other day I was thinking on my way to the gym, I thought, oh, Kim, you could not do this today. Let's just go do a walk. Let's take it easy today. And I checked back in and said, no, this is my commitment to myself today to go do this was something I had said I wanted to do because it was making me feel better and I need to go do it. And I did. And I obviously felt really good afterwards. So I'm making a huge plug for movement in a way that works for you in a regular basis, because I got to say, for me, this sitting so much has not been really good and has not felt good in my body. Lastly, I want to say you did not hear me say a thing about movement for decreasing calories or to burn off food. It's really about movement for movement's sake in order to feel good in my body. Number 2 on my list that I found is that I have been allowing myself to sleep more. I'm going to bed earlier and I'm sleeping more. And I got to say, this has been a huge win. In times of stress, for me, sleep is super valuable, and I've actually been allowing myself to sleep in later, to go to bed earlier, to really allow my body to rest, and that has been a huge win. A year ago, I would have been up at a certain time, getting ready and doing certain things, or kind of sleeping less, and this has been really impactful for me to allow myself to increase my time sleeping. The third thing that I have noticed that's been super effective for me is getting back in my rhythm with food. What I know is I know that there's types of food, times of days of eating that works really well for me. And this is through the process of me working on intuitive eating, learning how to eat intuitively, learning how to be more present in my body. And what I found is that when there's been this time of the COVID and I told you that I was eating more comfort food, my body didn't feel as good. And what happens is when I get back in the pattern of eating, the way of eating that works great for my body, I feel really good and I respond really well to it. Once again, you've not heard me talk about calories or not eating certain foods. What I'm saying is that I've gone back to a way of eating that works for me because of the intuitive eating I've been practicing for so many years. The fourth thing that I've been doing is more recent, and it's not been consistent, but it works really well, is I notice that when I feel overwhelmed, I turn off the news. And that has been a huge win where I just go, I'm done with this. I know what's going on enough, and I turn it off. This has been real helpful for me because the news for me has felt emotionally draining, mentally draining, and there's a point where it really upsets me and makes me feel anxious. I know that I don't want to increase anxiety in myself, and watching that news makes me feel anxious. So I decide I turn it off. I go to do something else rather than watching the news. So you just heard me talk about my check-in with all the areas, the 9 areas where I've been struggling in. And then I gave you 4 ideas of what I've been doing differently in order to feel more balanced and to get back in that kind of level state. And this has been working really well for me. So now I'm going to wonder for all of you, if you had your check-in, if you went through all the areas of how your life is being impacted now, and I invite you to include the areas that are specific to this pandemic, and don't overlook it, because what I find consistently is when people are not noticing how the pandemic is affecting their lives, they're actually missing this really kind of juicy part of what's negative or what's causing problems. Because once we have that check-in and we notice and acknowledge and say the words of what the problem is, then we can do something about it. Granted, I can't take away the pandemic. I can't take away all the things that are going on in the world, but I can increase my movement. I can have more sleep. I can eat in a pattern that fits in my body and my lifestyle. I also can notice when I feel overwhelmed and shut down the news, right? I then have power. I feel empowered to do the things that are mine to do. So I want to encourage you to have that look for yourself. We have a doable every time on our podcast to help you get back in contact with what What is yours to do? What can you do? Because having insight without action doesn't work. And I'm all into having some kind of action. I want to invite you to end this year of 2020 with this pandemic going on, thriving and feeling mentally well. And this is my opportunity to check back in with myself and check back in with all of you to make sure we're all headed forward on that path that is towards our wellness. So I'm looking forward to hearing how it goes. Join me in the Feed Your Soul Community Facebook page. Let me know how it's going. Let me know what you're doing because I really want to know. The more we check in with each other, the better we're going to all feel, and we're going to be inspired to keep moving on this wellness path. This is Kim McLaughlin. This is the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. I am so glad to be back having this podcast going, and I look forward to bringing a new topic to you next week. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. We come to you every Monday with fresh new ideas to help you end emotional eating and put food in its proper place as nourishment. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and review it and let us know what you think. Thank you for joining us.